In 2014, fans of the Souls series were treated to the sequel to the first DS game with Dark Souls 2. Though it looks similar to the first game, Dark Souls 2 is rather infamous for its changes to the formula that DS1 fine-tuned. With annoying enemy placement, tons of backtracking, and a large plethora of bosses. Notably, the director of the first Dark Souls, Hidetaka Miyazaki, was not present for much of the game's development, since he was busy working on another project that's nothing special. The publisher Bandai Namco would re-release the game 1 year later in the form of the Scholar of the First Sin edition, which changed several enemy placements, items, and came packaged with all the DLC post-launch. And since this is the version that is now readily available, I'll be covering this one for the video. Hey, my name is Jude, and if you've never ventured to the land of Drang Lake before, then I'm going to tell you what is Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin. So let's get that story out of the way, shall we? The game begins with our player character being told of a land far off called Drang Lake via this grandma over here, who tells us to go and end the curse of the undead, and we make our way there thanks to the raging whirlpool as we dream on. Anyhoodle, we then wake up in the Things Betwixt, where a bunch of gossiping grandmas tell us we need a shower and are tasked with collecting powerful souls, where we then make our way to Majula, and we meet the most white bread of white bread firekeepers called the Emerald Herald, who tell us to once again seek powerful souls. Translation, you gotta go out and kill the 4 old ones, seek an audience with the old King Vendrick, and choose to continue the Age of Fire, or let the flame go out and begin the Age of Dark. But regardless, the story is very much there. You don't need to know anything about the first game to understand the plot of Dark Souls 2, since it's very self-contained and is barely referenced in future entries either. Though there are a handful of connections from the first game, there are tons of new characters and lore to follow along with if you're curious about the world of Drang Lake. Just don't expect to get too attached to them, okay? This is Dark Souls after all, everyone dies. You'll be playing as the player character, simply referred to as the Bearer of the Curse, who will need to slay foes across the land of Drang Lake to acquire more souls to level up and acquire the strength to make it to the end. Since I already went over the basics of the mechanics in the DS1 video, link in the description down below, I won't be going over the same things I covered last time. But the same rules apply. You heal with your Estus flasks, acquire souls from enemies, use them to level up your stats, and when you die, you have one chance to get them back before they're gone forever. Though the starting classes and choices are different from the first game. You'll start the game out giving your character a name, and canonically in this video, his name will forever be John Darksoul. Then you'll select what starting class you want to play throughout the beginning portions of the game, which just determines your starting stats basically. Warrior has the highest starting strength at 15, Knight is a good all-rounder, Swordsman with the highest starting dex at 16, followed closely by the Bandit with 14. Cleric begins with the highest amount of faith at 12, Sorcerer with intelligence at 14, and Deprived once again has the lowest and most even out stats at the start. But the new class, the Explorer, starts out with the highest of this game's new stat, Adaptability, at 12. Which is where I perfectly segue into DS2's new, very important, and awful stats to level up. You can read up on the stat descriptions to get a better idea as to what they do, but Adaptability is one you should prioritize in the early game, because this stat adds more iframes to your dodge rolls, which prevents you from getting hit during your dodge rolls. This is stupid. So you'll want to get this stat up to 26 or 30 to make your dodges actually good this time around. Who in the world thought tying iframes to a level up stat is anyone's guess? But congrats, I saved you from having an awful first game experience. You're welcome. Anyways, Dark Souls 2 has several items that you'll want to watch out for along your journey. At the start of the game, after choosing your starting class, you'll be given a choice as to what starting gifts you want to take along with you. The Life Ring, which increases HP by 5%, yippee! Human effigies, healing ware, a homeward bone, seed of a tree of giants, a petrified something, and a bonfire ascetic. Now most of these starting items are good, sort of, but the ones I tend to go for are the healing wares, since it grants multiple life gem types at the start. Life gems are an exclusive item to DS2, which will heal the player over time and have a faster heal speed than Estus flasks. Also, you can heal while moving. Thank you, FromSoft. The next major item to look out for are the human effigies. These act as your humanities from the first game, and will unhollow your ugly self when used. They can be used from the endgame menu instead of bonfires only like in the last one. And you want to be human as much as you possibly can, since when you die, your health bar gets reduced the more times you die. So definitely look out for these in the world or purchase them for the merchants in game. The Estus Flask also returns in this one, and unfortunately, it sucks. It takes way too long to heal and will inevitably get you hit while healing. There are also important items like the Sublime Bone Dust throughout the world that will increase how much Estus you heal from a drink. Basically, this game's equivalent to Firekeeper Souls. And just like in DS1, Homegrown Bones will let you warp back to your previously rested bonfire. However, near the end of the game, the Emerald Harrow will give the player the Aged Feather, an item that allows you to warp back to bonfires, which can be used an infinite amount of times. Other important items include Estus Shards to add more flasks to your Estus, of which there are 11 in the game, the Pharaoh's Lockstones, which can be inserted in certain walls to access secret areas, but many of them are traps meant to waste your Lockstones, so watch out. And one of the most important items has to be the Fragrant Branches of Yore. These items can be used to depetrify stone objects that are blocking the way, most of which will turn hostile upon waking up, with a few exceptions like this NPC blocking the switch to this door in Majula. And you want to depetrify her as soon as you can, because she's blocking major game progress. And lastly, an important item to use are the various torches. Since Dark Souls 2 is, well, dark, you can light up runes by activating a torch. And some enemies are even afraid of fire, so use that to your advantage as well. And you can use torches to set fire to the windmill at Earthen Peak. Trust me, you want to do this. As well as illuminate the boss arena in the old center in Sinner's Rise. Though torches do have a time limit before they go out, so be sure to get plenty of them to restore your time. Dark Souls 2 features several new and returning weapons to help you on your quest, and you can infuse weapons to have them do elemental damage just like in the last game too. But as a general rule of thumb, infusing weapons with lightning is always recommended, because surprise surprise, getting zapped still kills people, even after being nerfed. All of the first game weapon types return as well, like straight swords, great swords, and axes and whatnot. Though there is a new weapon type exclusive to this one called the Twin Blades, which are more for dexterity and strength builds. One of the best Twin Blades you can get is the Red Iron Twin Blade, a high damaging blade that, when maxed out, deals over 300 damage to a target. Now for other weapons you should use, one of the early game weapons I tend to stick with is the Bandit Axe, since it has a fast moveset, a low stat requirement, and can dish out some pretty high damage for this point in the game. But one of the best weapons in the game has to be the Craftsman's Hammer. This hammer can be found in a chest next to the blacksmith of the Lost Bastille, and dishes out some of the highest damage throughout the entire game. Plus, the moveset is very similar to the axe moveset as well, which is already a pretty good moveset to boot. Another powerful weapon are the various rapiers throughout the game, since these bad boys have high damage and cost very little stamina use. One of the best comes in the form of the Ice Rapier, which is a rare drop on the ice enemies of the Ivory King DLC. Also, they are light as heck, use them. Though if you want a weapon that's more strength focused, one of the best ones in the game is by far the Macedon Halberd. This blade is dropped via the Macedon Sentries, nada. Though it may require 26 strength to wield, this weapon is absolutely worth it, since it can go up to 400 damage when upgraded, and has a 3-hit running attack that spins you forward all kuru-kuru like. Now as far as spells and whatnot, talismans and catalysts have been renamed to chimes and staves. Chimes can cast miracles, while staves cast sorcery and hexes. I should also preface this and say that I have not dabbled in pyromancy or hexes in Dark Souls 2. But from what I have seen, sorceries and miracles are still pretty good in this one. Most of the sorcery spells are just as good as they were in the first game, like Soul Sphere and Crystal Sorceries too. And you can find this NPC named Carhillion in No Man's Wharf who will teach you spells if your intelligence is above 8. And just like DS1, you can find equipment to increase your casting speeds as well, like the Lion Mace set found in a chest behind this petrified Lion Man. Sure, it looks ugly, but the speed increase is hard not to pass up, honestly. On top of that, you can also find this NPC named Falcon at the Huntsman Copse, who will give you the Hexer set if your stats are high enough, or just kill him. The Hexer Hood is a must for any and all magic/faith builds, since it increases how many spells you can cast by 1. And since Soul Sphere only has 2 casts, yeah, you better get this one. And the best staff in the game is easily the Staff of Wisdom, which can be found by killing a mimic in Seldora. Unfortunately, this thing requires up to 50 intelligence to use, so you better level up that intelligence as soon as you can, brother. Now, while many miracles are tied to healing spells, you can get some more offensive spells early on too, like the Lightning Sphere from Lycia after the Dragon Rider boss. Though it only has 3 casts by itself, it's possible to stack multiple spells of the same type to get more casts out if you want. But you can find a more powerful miracle in the form of the Heavenly Thunder spell. And though Pride is a damsel in distress, this spell zaps foes at random and will put them through the ringer. You know, if it hits them. And you can acquire this spell from Blue Sentinel Targray after joining the Blue Sentinels Covenant or purchasing it from Cromwell the Partner. And one of the best chimes you can get early on is the Idol's Chime. You know, if you unalive your sister in Christ over here. And there's also the Dragon Chime, which you can get early by killing this dude in a wheelchair. He's not long for this world. Though, much like the Staff of Wisdom, the Dragon Charm requires 50 faith to wield. So, yeah, good luck with that one. And before I forget, you can equip several rings to your character like in the first game. But now you can hold up to 4 rings, unlike the first game, which only let you have 2, because FromSoft discovered that there's more than 2 fingers on a hand. Most rings in the game have a +1 version somewhere in the world, like the Chloranthy Ring +1, which boosts your stamina recovery and can be found in this chest in the Shaded Woods. You've got your returning rings, like the Gold and Silver Serpent Rings, which increases souls gained and drop rates of items, along with the Ring of Blades, which increases how much physical damage you inflict on enemies. And you can find a +1 version after being the Pursuer in Iron Keep. Though the most important ring, by far, is the King's Ring. This one is acquired near the end of the game after finding Vendrick's tomb, and allows you to access key doors to progress to new areas like Aldius Keep or the bonfire next to a giant's memory in the forest area. Just like the first game, DS2 has several NPCs that you can follow along with during your quest in Dren Lake. The first one you'll come across are the 3 grandmas at the start of the game. They'll stay here for the entirety of the game, but if you have the King's Ring, she'll give you 6 human effigies, and will allow you to respec your character at any point if you're not happy with your current build. Though you will need an item like the Soul Vessels to do this. Another NPC you can come across in the Things Betwixt are the invisible birds like in the first Dark Souls, who will trade you items depending upon what you give them. But the single most important NPC goes to the Emerald Herald. She will remain in Majula for 90% of the adventure, and you will need to level up your character by speaking to her. And trust me, this will not be the last time that FromSoft does this. But holy moly does she talk your ear off before leveling up. Yeah, there's a reason why players skip over her dialogue all the time. Anyways, within Majula, you can find your first blacksmith named Linagrast. But he's so hollow that he forgot his keys, somehow, which can be purchased from the merchant hag in the Forest of Fallen Giants. And make sure to exhaust her dialogue so she'll move to Majula to have another shop for items and whatnot. Another blacksmith can be found in the Lost Bastille after the wall explodes, or you find the key, so you can talk to Steady Hand Macduff to buy and upgrade weapons and whatnot. Also, he's the only blacksmith who can infuse weapons with elements, so use him. There's also the merchant Moglin, who will sell you armor and even boss armor the further you go along. Or, you know, you can just kill him, because his set literally gives you extra souls upon killing enemies. Within the Lost Bastille, if you use a fragrant branch of Yore on this dude blocking the bonfire, you can talk to another NPC in the form of Straight of Ulafis. Not only does he sell various spells, but you can trade boss souls to get their weapons and whatnot. Another weaponsmith can be rescued in the Shaded Woods once you find the Fang Key behind this lion enemy and rescue Ornifex. She'll then move to Seldora, where you can trade even more boss souls if you want. Now, 2 NPCs whose quest lines are interconnected are Mild-Mannered Pate and Creighton the Wanderer. Pate will appear in several parts of the game, while Creighton needs to be freed from his jail cell in Huntsman's Copse. You'll come across these 2 during differing parts of the game, while they tell you how one is worse than the other and you shouldn't trust the other, which all comes ahead when you're forced to make a choice on which one to side with. Killing either will grant you Creighton's set and a key that leads to an area that is definitely not a trap in any way. And since Pate gives you his set in the windmill, I tend to kill him and side with Creighton to get his set instead. But either way, they're both scumbags. Much like DS1, Dark Souls 2 will take you far across the land of Dragon Lake. Sometimes it's straightforward on where to go next, but other times you'll be scratching your head trying to figure out where to go now. But as far as main game progression goes, Majula has access to all 4 key areas to progress in. The tunnel just past the Firekeeper leads to the Forest of Fallen Giants, while the spot right before you enter Majula has another route that will eventually lead to the Freya Soul. The tunnel on the right side of Majula can lead you both to the Lost Sinner's Soul and the Iron King Soul. And the well within the middle of Majula leads to the Rotten Soul. Ew. But either way, you'll be trekking through forests, windmills that lead to volcanoes in the sky. Okay, game. To acquire all 4 Lord Souls, and every time you beat one, you'll light a primordial bonfire required to gain access to Dragonlade Castle. But on the 4th one, you'll get blasted and jump scared by, whatever the heck this thing is. Heading back to the Fork Road before the Shaded Woods and taking a left at Albuquerque will lead you to Dragonlade Castle, the Shrine of Amana, and finally the Undead Crypt, where you'll then acquire the previously mentioned King's Ring. And now you have to head back to the Fork Road, go straight, and end up in Aldia's Keep, where you'll then make your way to the Dragon Eyrie, talk with this giant dragon to get the Ashen Mist to go into people's hearts. Whatever, just go with it. And from here, your main task is to acquire the Giant's Kinship to unlock the end of the game via the Throne of Want. This can be done by returning to the Forest of Fallen Giants, use the King's Ring to gain access to this tree, and enter the Memory of Jay, where you'll have to fight past the Giant Lord and get the Giant's Kinship. With that, you're now able to beat the game, return to Dragonlade Castle, open the door, pass the bonfire, enter the Throne of Want, and defeat the bosses. However, if you want to get the choice of a second ending, prepare to do some work. To get the second ending, you'll need to defeat Vendrick and speak to Aldia at every bonfire he spawns at. And killing Vendrick is no simple task, because you'll have to acquire 5 souls of a giant to lower his defense. And killing Vendrick is no simple task, since you'll have to acquire 5 souls of a giant to lower his defense. But the 4th one requires you to return to the Black Gulch, take a leap of faith, and kill the 2 giants in this cave, who are tough in their own right, unless you cheese them with the bow and arrow. However, the 5th and most difficult to acquire has to be the face-off against one of the worst bosses in the game, Ancient Dragon. This behemoth is one of the toughest fights in the game, since he can breathe fire down on the arena and will stomp you to death with his questionable hitboxes. And the best way to dodge his flame breath is to follow his tail and book it to the edge of the arena so you don't get cooked to death. And since he has a lot of health and just stands there like an idiot, this fight can take nearly 5 minutes to defeat. Did I mention that the runback for this fight sucks? Anyways, with all 5 giant souls, you can smack Vendrick a couple of times to start the fight. Vendrick has very telegraphed swings, but his overhead move is the right time to get a few swings in. And you better get those timings down, because he hits like a truck that'll kill you in 2 hits. Killing him will allow you to get the second ending, as well as the 3rd and true final boss of the game. Aside from janky hitboxes and weird level design, what makes DS2 are the large number of bosses showered throughout the game. The same rules apply from DS1. You learn their patterns, time your rolls to win, summon NPCs and players to help, etc. But, and that's a big but here, your character does not have iframes when entering fog walls. Yippee! Be they non-boss areas or actual boss encounters, your character will get stun locked if hit, which makes runbacks a literal nightmare if you don't kill any of the enemies. Wow, what great game design, am I right?
Let me in! Let me in!
Anywho, there are a handful of fights that can be approached differently if you interact with the environment. Like the early Dragon Rider boss, where you can press switches in the zone to give you more room in the arena, or the Lost Sinner, where you can light up the arena if you have the key to light the oil. Also, remember how I mentioned you could light up the windmill and Earthen Peak? Well, you better do that, because that straight up removes most of the poison from the arena of the boss, Mytha, the Baneful Queen. By the way, Dark Souls 2 features a lot, and I do mean a lot, of optional encounters, several of which return from the first game, like the old Dragon Slayer and the Belfry Gargoyles, which is literally just Ornstein and Bell Gargoyles, but worse. One boss that you wouldn't think is optional is the Smelter Demon of the Iron Keep. Sure, there's a bonfire right afterwards, but if you turn off the fire in the center area, you can just avoid him and try to get one of the bonfires later on. But some of the more egregious optional fights go to the Royal Rat Vanguard and the Royal Rat Authority. Since you're stuck in a room full of rats that pray at night and stalk at night till the giant rat who makes all the rules shows up with a mohawk, and then you beat him. Just don't get cursed, you know, because that'd be kind of embarrassing to lose to rats. The Royal Rat Authority, on the other hand, has 3 enemies at the start that will cause toxicity if you don't kill them immediately. But again, completely optional. But one of the most infamous fights goes to the Pursuer, who can be fought at the top of the Forest of Fallen Giants. Killing this boss gives a great shortcut to the Lost Bastille if beaten. And he features telegraph moves that can be avoided by strafing and dodging to the right, along with the ballista at the back of the arena if you can hit him in time. However, they don't call him the Pursuer for nothing, because he will show up at multiple points in the game to mess you up, like in the Lost Bastille and the Things Betwixt. And unless you're out looking for a new mastermind for Mr. Krabs, you better watch out for the gosh darn Pursuer. And now we come to the DLC portion of this video. Dark Souls 2 features 3 DLCs that are recommended for the endgame. These can be accessed via the 3 shrines. The Crown of the Old Iron King requires you to find the Heavy Iron Key to access, which can be found in the Forest of Fallen Giants in a cave guarded by this abomination, and you'll be running to the bottom of the tower while acquiring the item Smelter Wedge to destroy these idols, as well as fighting your way through some of the toughest enemies in the entire game. Reaching the bottom and smashing 11 Ashen Idols will let you face off against the Fume Knight. And you better get all those Ashen Idols because that will make the fight literally unbeatable. Fume Knight will have you learn the timings to dodge his strikes and sweeps until you reach phase 2, where he whips out the Ultra Fume Greatsword and has one of the slowest but hard-hitting attacks in the whole game. Beating this fight grants the player with the Crown of the Old Iron King. The Crown of the Sunken King DLC can be accessed past the primordial bonfire of the Black Gulch, which has you pressing switches to gain entry into the temple, where you'll eventually face off against Alana, the Squalid Queen, and the final boss of the DLC, Sin, the Slumbering Dragon. And beating these bosses awards you with the Crown of the Sunken King as well. And finally, we have the Crown of the Ivory King DLC, which has you travel to a frozen castle via the Shrine of Winter just before Drangleic Castle. This icy forest, both foul and fair, has a frozen heart worth mining, since you'll be trekking to find the Eye of the Priestess so you can see the first boss, Ava, the King's Pet. Yes, you have to explore the whole area during a giant winter storm to find an item just to visibly see the boss. Yay. And beating this fight grants you access to the entrance of the final boss of the DLC, Burnt Ivory King. That being said, just like Fume Knight, if you want to make this fight actually, fightable, you'll want to go backtrack and find all 4 Lois Knights in the DLC, since they will help you fight off the hordes of enemies and seal the portals that they spawn from. So be sure to have a guide on hand as to where these guys are. Because, good lord, the Ivory King is no pushover, who's rocking over 8,000 HP and a magic sword that will wipe the floor with you if you're not careful. And, just like the last 2 DLCs, beating this boss grants you, you guessed it, the Crown of the Ivory King. But before I forget, all 3 DLCs feature extra bosses not connected to the main quest, all of which are some of the worst areas in the entire series. And most, if not all of them, are reskin fights like Blue Smelter Demon, Gank Squad, and Lute and Zullen found in the single worst area in the entire series, the Frozen Outskirts, a large zone covered head to toe in a blizzard and unicorns that will spawn kill you. And knowing Miyazaki, he would have never conceived such a frozen nightmare. That's not true, he would have totally done this.
I don't know what that is.
Okay, so let's go over some tips and fun facts about the game, shall we? Enemies will stop respawning once you kill them up to 11 times. And within Majula, you can find 3 little pigs who, after killing enough times, spawn a giant warhog out of nowhere. Okay. You may remember that I briefly mentioned an item called the Bonfire Ascetic earlier on in the video. Well, this item can be used at a bonfire and a message will play saying, "What is done cannot be undone." Basically, this turns the whole area into a New Game Plus zone, where enemies are stronger, rand phantoms can appear too, and you can refight bosses to get their souls again if you want. But if you beat Dukes to your Freya on a New Game Plus area, you can trade it for weapons like the Moonlight Greatsword too, keeping the tradition of this weapon being in every FromSoft game. Upon arriving at Vendrick Castle, in order to open the doors, you'll need to defeat the enemies near the golems to activate them to open said doors. And within the castle, you can find this ghost NPC, who will become a merchant if you show him the King's Ring too. What's also in this area is the throne room, which is bizarrely empty until you play in New Game Plus, which has not one, but 2 pursuers. Yeah, I got luck with that. I know I should have mentioned this earlier, but unlike DS1, you can now freely warp to any bonfire at the start of the game. And if lighting a torch via a bonfire is too far away for you, you can use an item called Flame Butterfly to instantly light up a torch. So you may be wondering what's the point of the crowns from the DLC. Well, if you return to Vendrick's tomb and speak to him in a memory, he will reward the player with the ability to not go hollow upon dying. But you will lose all your souls upon death, and you will need to find Vendrick's crown past this door in the Shrine of Amana, guarded by another Dragon Rider. And by then, yeah, cool. Moving on. So while Dark Souls 2 may be considered the black sheep of the franchise, with its fall damage, janky hitboxes, and an overdose of bosses, it is still a worthwhile experience with unique weapons, armor, and lore to learn about, making for a challenging experience that holds some of the strongest moments in the franchise to this day. If you wish to purchase this game, it is now available via the updated Skull the First Sin Edition, which is now available on PS5 and Xbox Series via backwards compatibility, along with the PC version via Steam. Thank you all so much for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I hope you all have a blessed day. Take care.